During the 2 years of my residence in Copenhagen, I had never been out into the open country. Once only had I been in the park, and where I had been deeply engrossed by studying the diversions of the people and their gay tumult. In the spring of the third year, I went out for the first time amid the verdure of the spring morning. It was into the garden of the Frederiksberg, the summer residence of Frederick V. I stood still suddenly under the first large budding beech tree. The sun made the leaves transparent. There was a fragrance, a freshness. The birds sang. I was overcome by it. I shouted aloud for joy, threw my arms around the tree and kissed it. "Is he mad?" said a man close behind me. It was one of the servants of the castle. I ran away, shocked at what I had heard, and then went thoughtfully and calmly back to the city. My voice had, in the meantime, in part regained its richness. The singing master of a choir school heard it, offered me a place in the school, thinking that, by singing with the choir, I should acquire greater freedom in the exercise of my powers on the stage. I thought that I could see by this means a new way opened for me. I went from the dancing school into the singing school and into the choir, now as a shepherd and now as a warrior. The theatre was my world. I had permission to go in the pit, and thus it fared ill with my Latin. And yet many people say that there was no Latin required for singing in the choir, and that without the knowledge of this language it was possible to become a great actor. I thought there was good sense in that, and very often, either with or without reason, excused myself for my Latin evening lesson. Goldberg became aware of this, and for the first time I received a reprimand which almost crushed me to the earth. I fancy that a criminal could suffer more by hearing the sentence of death pronounced upon him. The distress of mind must have expressed itself in my countenance, for he said, "Do not act any more comedy." But it was no comedy for me. I was now to learn Latin no longer. I felt my dependence upon the kindness of others in such a degree as I had never done before. Occasionally I had had gloomy and earnest thoughts in looking forward to my future, because I was in want of a very necessary of life at other times. I had the perfect thoughtlessness of a child. A widow of a celebrated Danish statesman, Christian Colrians, and her daughter were the first ladies of high rank who cordially befriended the poor lad, who listened to me with sympathy and saw my frequently. Mrs. von Kolviansen resided during the summer at Bankhorst, where also lived the poet Rebeck and his interesting wife. Rebeck never spoke to me, but his lively and kind-hearted wife often amused herself with me. I had at that time again begun to write a tragedy, which I read aloud to her. Immediately on hearing the first sentence, she exclaimed, "But you have actually taken whole passages out of Oldensch, and Engermann." "Yes, but they are so beautiful," replied I in my simplicity, and read on. One day, when I was going from her to Mrs. von Kolviansen, she gave me a handful of roses and said, "Will you take them up to her? It will certainly give her pleasure to receive them from the hand of a poet." These words were said half in jest, but it was the first time that anybody had connected my name with that of a poet. It went through me, body and soul, and tears filled my eyes. I know that, from this very moment, my mind was awoke to writing and poetry. Formerly it had been merely an amusement by way of variety for my puppet theatre. At Bakehus lived also Professor Thiel, a young student at the time, but even when the editor of the Danish popular legends and known to the public as the solver of Bergen's riddle and as a writer of beautiful poetry, he was possessed of sentiment, true inspiration, and heart. He had calmly, attentively watched the unfolding of my mind until we now become friends. He was one of the few who, at the time, spoke the truth of me, when other people were making themselves merry at my expense and having only eyes for it which was ludicrous in me. People called me in jest the little orator, and, as such, I was an object of curiosity. They found amusement in me, and I mistook every smile for a smile of applause. One of my later friends has told me that it probably was about this period that he saw me for the first time. It was in the drawing-room of a rich tradesman, where people were making themselves very merry with me. They desired me to repeat one of my poems, and as I did this with great feeling, the merriment was changed into sympathy with me. I heard it said every day but a good thing it would be for me if I could study. People advised me to devote myself to science, but no one moved one step to enable me to do so. It was labor enough for me to keep body and soul together. It wherefore occurred to me to write a tragedy which I would offer to the Theatre Royal, and would then begin to study with the money which I should thus obtain. Whilst Goldberg instructed me in Danish, I had written a tragedy from a German story called The Chapel in the Wood. Yet this was done merely as an exercise in the language, and as he forbade me in the most decided manner to bring it out, I would not do so. I organized my own material, therefore, and within 14 days I wrote my national tragedy called Robbers in Wiesenberg. There was secretly a word in it correctly written, but I had no person to help me because I meant it to be anonymous. There was nevertheless one person that made it into the secret, namely the young lady whom I had me with an dance during a reputation for confirmation, the only one who at the time showed me kindness and good will. It was through her that I was introduced to the Colbert's family, and was known and received in all those circles of which the one leads into the other. She paid some of to prepare a legible copy of my piece, and I took the present it for perjury. After an interval of 6 weeks, I received it back, accompanied by a letter which said the people did not frequently wish to retain works which betrayed, in so great a degree, a want of elementary knowledge.